The topic here today, cracking the code, family conversations about estate planning. And let's reframe how we think about this and how we talk about estate planning, because it's truly extraordinary what we can accomplish when we communicate. What are we going to cover here today? We're going to talk about how we need to rethink communicating about estate planning. We're going to talk about the how, the when, the what to communicate parents to adult children and adult children to parents. I'm going to talk about that. And how we can talk about other families, talk about this with other family members when we need to. And for adult children, the topics you must discuss with parents to save hundreds of thousands of dollars or even millions. Why it's on us to talk to our parents about these issues. We write a lot of books about this. We write a lot of articles. So Mike and I co-authored 2 books, Special Needs Trust Creation and Management Guide and Facing the Reality of Long-Term Care. Mike also authored a book, Beat Estate Tax Forever. So we live and breathe these topics. We think about them all the time. I want us to reframe communication about estate planning. I think it's broken, the way that we think about talking about estate planning and tax planning and long-term care planning. And I have a big pet peeve. I hate the term estate planning. Mike, I think you agree with that, right?
Whoa.
We hate the term estate planning.
Forever, we've hated that term.
Hate it. Because what do you picture when you hear the term estate planning? You probably get an image that's something like this. It's an estate. This is some British estate. I don't know where it is. But who has an estate? Like, we don't have estates. We have maybe a home, maybe you have a condo, maybe you have savings. And what do we think of when we think of estate plan? We think of the reading of the will. Someone passes away and the lawyer comes out and it's in all these movies and they read the will and sometimes a recording of the deceased parent telling everyone what they get. And that's just not how this should be. It should not be put in a drawer and taken out when the worst case scenario happens. We need to plan ahead. This is not the way that we should think about this. This is not the way we should talk about it. It should be talked about ahead of time. Let's reframe this. Estate planning is a horrible term, and really we think it should be reframed. This is about family empowerment. It's about creating the legal tools to carry out your hopes and dreams. And Mike, anything you'd add to that?
What we do is we take care of families. Estate planning, it's cold, it's sort of objective, and what we do is so subjective. Again, it's integrating tools that make things better for families with real life people.
Let's jump into our first topic here today. The how, the when, the what to communicate about estate planning. Let's talk about parents talking with adult children. So I think the appropriate person to talk about this subject is Michael Gilfix.
I'll just say we have 3 kids. We try to be very open with them, not about everything. You know, hey, not about everything, but we certainly want them to know what the concept is. So, how do you initiate that? The dream is you sit down and you have a very simple, very direct talk. You basically say, look, we've done our planning. It affects you guys. It's your future as well as ours. Let's just talk about it so you know what we envision and the roles that you may be playing as things move along. So it can be very comfortable and very casual. Now, for many people, that's not the case. You don't feel comfortable doing that. Another tool that I think works very well is rather than say, I want to talk about this because I'm worried about it, you say, we have a trust, or we got this letter from the lawyer and it talks about all of these issues. And I thought it would be good to really look at this with you. So you're deflecting it. You're not making it, I'm worried about this, I'm concerned about this, but here's what the lawyer says. And these are the documents that we have in place.
Using us as the excuse. We have many clients, I think, who use meetings with us as their excuse for talking about it. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, we've recommended that forever, that, blame the lawyer. Maybe you don't really want to talk about this. You want to blame the lawyer. And by the same token, on many occasions, we facilitate that parent-child discussion. Parents come in with their kid or kids, and we set the agenda, we facilitate, but it's really to facilitate, again, discussion between parent and child. So, we know that there are hesitations that you have. Many of us feel very private about these issues. You may be concerned that your kids are going to have to confront the fact that they're going to lose their parents, that they're going to inherit a lot of money. You may be worried that they're going to lose their motivation to work, that they're going to be trust babies. Now, these things come up, but putting your head in the sand is just not a solution. This doesn't work for everybody. We know that. We're not idealizing or closing our eyes to the reality. There may be issues in the family. Some of the kids don't get along. There's a concern about a son-in-law, a daughter-in-law, whatever. It isn't always easy. We acknowledge that. But I strongly recommend that these these barriers, these issues should not stop you from taking these steps. You need to involve the next generation. So we recommend that you share your documents. By the way, if you share your basic plan, you have a trust. Whatever you've done, that does not always mean that they know how much you have. Many say, I don't mind letting them know what the basic plan is. I really don't want to let them know how much I have or where it is. That's up to you. That's very individual. We really get that. It doesn't always work. You have to be careful. We have to be sensitive to the realities in the family, but being as direct as you can be is probably the key in making it comfortable and casual. Finding tools that'll make it easier for you to raise these topics. So that's the how.
Well, I think we live in a day and age where there's more visibility about that. I mean, adult kids are not dumb, right? Like we get an idea of this. Now, we have some clients who are very secretive and they probably have done a very good job of kind of guarding it over time. We have some clients who live in very, very average looking homes who happen to have tens of millions of dollars in the bank. But adult children these days, or even younger children, they know how to Google the Zillow value for your home, and if you have other properties, they're not blind to this, and they can kind of, we see financial statements and things like that where if you're not very careful. So generally speaking, I do think a little more visibility is better. Not financial statements maybe, but you get an idea just from conversations and things like that. It's very case by case specific, but I think we live in a day and age where there's more visibility than ever.
Absolutely, and in a moment I'm going to talk about the topics, what to discuss. But, what marks it is really important that the kids know a lot. You may think they don't have a sense of what you have, but of course they have some sense. And particularly if one or more of them are going to play some role in managing things for you if you're ill, all of these things have to come together. So when should you have this discussion? Well, as soon as possible. That's for sure. You may be waiting for a kid to mature a little bit more if you're a younger parent. Of course, again, no, it's not a one size fits all. Now, if significant steps are going to be taken in your planning, perhaps you're creating an entity like a limited liability company, and you're going to involve the kids as members. Well, they have to become a part of that, of course. If there are health issues that come up, that's when you absolutely have to have that discussion. Who's named in the advance directive to be your healthcare decision-making agent? How does it impact your other planning? The kids are going to feel this development, and they should know how the planning fits together. It's going to give your kids a lot of comfort, and I think strengthen them and strengthen the relationship. So as to when, the sooner the better. Find tools that make it easier for you. Now, what should be discussed? Number one, who's going to be the trustee? Ideally, you will have chosen one or more of your kids, and if not, somebody else, that's fine. There's no rule that it has to be your kids. But who's going to play what role? Who's going to be the trustee? Who may be named in the advance directive? Healthcare decision-making can be different. So it isn't always one kid is going to be doing absolutely everything. Maybe you've set up trust for the kids, and who's going to be the trustee? Best that they should not be surprised by what happens. That's just not a good thing generally. The distribution plan. Should you tell them who's going to get what? Well, if it's simple and everybody's getting an equal share, perhaps that does make it easier, and you say that if that's the case. Your trust controls assets that are in the trust. You may have retirement assets that are not controlled by the trust. So just be cognizant that for a moment here, I'm really focusing on the trust, the planning that we would typically do for you. So on the issue of the distribution plan, you may not be leaving everything in equal shares to the kids. And if you're not, it's particularly important that they know that it's your decision and why you did it. You don't want to leave a legacy of anger between the kids. So if they don't hear it from you, so they know that it's your decision and why, they could blame each other after you're gone. And that would be, a really terrible, terrible thing. They should know in advance, not all the details, but take responsibility for the decisions that you're making about the distribution plan.
Surprises are bad when it comes to estate planning. That people worry about family conflicts. They worry about one kid getting mad at the other. That usually happens when there's no communication ahead of time. Surprises lead to conflicts. I think that's actually a really important way to think about this. Not that every family, and actually, Mike, why don't you bring up just the issue of, we recommend that families talk about this, but a lot of families, maybe there's some strained relationships, maybe communication isn't so good. So this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach.
This aspect of the work that we do is arguably more counseling than legal, right? Because we're talking about how you're going to work things out in the family. If you're going to do something unique, out of the ordinary, again, can't overemphasize taking responsibility for it. We have so many stories. We're not going to go through any of them today where, again, as Mark mentioned, if there's a surprise, somebody gets really angry. And that's when they might want to challenge what you've done, God forbid. And by the way, if you're making any significant charitable bequests, I think that's a good thing to tell your kids about so that they don't have an expectation that they're going to get everything when in fact they're not. Another major issue is health care planning. What if you want to age in place and stay at home? That can cost an enormous amount of money. What role are the kids going to play? Do you envision one of them giving you care at home? Probably not, but that comes up all the time. What if you learn through discussions that one of your kids vehemently disagrees with something you've said in your advance directive about end-of-life planning? This doesn't come up often, but when it comes up, it's a huge deal. You need to know if you have a kid, for example, who may object to whatever decisions you're making for religious reasons, whatever reasons there may be. And there are ways we can address that to reduce the possibility of conflict down the road. Tax planning. My goodness, if there's any area where multi-generational planning comes into play, it's tax planning. We talk a lot about Proposition 19, the desire to keep the house and other property in the family. You have to involve your kids if we're going to do proactive planning to avoid the horrific outcome of this new property tax law here that we have in California. So it's got to be discussed, got to find out, do the kids want to keep the house and the family? If so, one kind of planning makes sense. If they're going to sell it after you're gone, a different kind of planning makes sense. So knowing what your kids' wishes are, what their plans are, you raising it with them, that will guide a lot of the planning that you do. Isn't this self-evident? These issues are just below the surface. We kind of know they're there, but putting them on the table, such a service we'll be doing for everybody. If you are creating trusts to hold assets for the benefit of your kids, let your kids know. We always recommend these dynasty trusts. We call them family protection trusts for your kids, which means your kids are not going to inherit anything directly. Well, that's a good thing. They're going to control the money. It's protective. Let them know. If there's a special needs situation in the family, everybody knows, but let them know what the structure is, how it's going to operate, what a special needs trust means and what it does. And, we have our book that explains all of this if you do have that in the family.
Yeah, we have many clients will use attorney meetings with us, though, to do this, to have these discussions. So just to add for all of these, you have the family talk at home, but we have many clients who we have a peace of mind program. If you're an existing client, you're probably aware of that for people who want to stay in regular touch with us. They'll meet with us every year, and they will often bring in their kids from wherever their kids are. Zoom, it's easy. And they'll have those family meetings to go over a lot of this where we can help frame it. But the key, and I think I just want to make this so clear, is that we should talk about this whenever possible. One thing I would add about good times to do this can be around the holidays sometimes, having like family meetings to reflect on where you are, to have gratitude for what you have, and to talk about this. I think family holidays are also great times where everybody's in person, because I think in person is always better if we can do that. The how, the when, the what of communicating about estate planning, but let's talk about this from an adult child to parents perspective. Hopefully your parents are still around, depending on what your age are. And what do we need to talk about? For us adult children, we need to talk to our parents about this. And here's how we're framing this. How can we initiate and frame this talk? When is a good time to do it? And what are the critical topics that we should bring up? How do we initiate these conversations as the kids talking to our parents about it? Well, here's how not to do it. Hey, mom and dad, what am I gonna get when you're gone? I kind of need to know, like, am I gonna get the house? Like, I want to know what I'm gonna get, just so I just want to know. Tell me what I'm gonna get. That's a terrible way to do it. It shouldn't be about you. The first thing I would advise is it has to be about your parents first, and then about the family as the whole. And it should be framed around hopes and dreams and wishes and fears. What are you worried about, mom and dad? How can we make sure that we have a plan that we're communicating together to make sure your worst fears don't happen? Is your worst fear that you have to go live in an assisted living facility and can't get taken care of at home? And let's talk about what your hopes and dreams are on the other side of that. What are your goals for your own journey, the last stages of your life, the next stages of your life? What are your visions and goals for your kids, for my generation and for the next generation, your grandkids? And that's a wonderful way to frame it. And it makes it much more about shared visions and dreams. Now, if you know it's a larger estate, we may need to think about estate tax planning. But a lot of the steps that parents take are really there for the benefit of the kids. They don't affect themselves that much. If you create a dynasty trust or if you do property tax planning, that's not about the parents, it's about the kids. So it's really important we bring these up. Now, when is a good time to do this? Well, I think one thing, any major family event, well, a major health problem, if there's a health scare for a parent or a health scare for a child. We have many adult children. We have our own health problems at times. That's a good time to bring this up. The birth of a child, or a grandchild, that's a wonderful time to bring it up. And I think family holidays, when everybody's gathered together, I think it's a great idea generally to have moments where you talk about gratitude and what you're all thankful for. That also can be a great segue into having family discussions around your estate plan. But again, don't use the word estate plan. Let's talk about our legal plan as it pertains to our shared hopes and dreams, and as it pertains to empowering each other to help each other out. Now, what do you need to talk about? Topics can be endless. One is your successor trustee. Are you named as, am I the adult child? Hey, mom and dad, let me take a step back. The first question I would ask is, do you have an estate plan? Because if you don't, that's a big problem. If mom and dad don't have an estate plan, who's going to be dealing with the mess that's created? It's the adult children, right? They're going to be the ones having to go to court to get court orders or conservatorship to get the power to help mom and dad if they need it. They're going to be the ones stuck in court with probate because mom and dad didn't have a properly designed living trust. They're going to be the ones who don't have any asset protection, who face massive tax bills down the road. So the first topic is, do you have an estate plan? I think that's absolutely critical. But two, if mom and dad do have an estate plan, hey, who's named as trustee? Is it me? Am I going to be stepping in next? Or have you thought about this? Did you set up the plan many years ago? Is it up to date? Did you name a friend who's no longer even around? We have a lot of clients who they set up their plan years ago. Their kids were still young. Their kids aren't even named as trustees, but the kids get older. They're responsible. Maybe it makes sense to name the kids now. What are your hopes and dreams, mom and dad? What do you want when it comes to long-term care? By the way, when you talk about long-term care and the need for making sure that you're well taken care of down the road, you might have to talk about finances. You might have to talk about what you have in the way of bank savings, investments, and all that.
I think what I want to do is emphasize what you said, because I so appreciate what you said about hopes and dreams. It's just not that common for kids to ask their parents about that. There's assumptions made so often, and those assumptions don't always mesh with reality. And it also forces the parents to think about our hopes and dreams because, you coast along, you're feeling good, you're not ill. And it is good to think these things through, but it doesn't come up naturally. So finding a pathway to make the parents think about what they want, where it's, challenging thoughts, right? And then how to communicate those to the kids and getting the kids on board.
But then the next stage is really talking about asset protection. Because let's be honest, if mom and dad worked hard and you know that your parents have a house that they've had for a long time, or if you're fortunate enough to have multiple properties. Well, if we live in California, we need to be aware of Prop 19 and the fact that without planning, property taxes could spike by tens of thousands of dollars per year if we don't take steps to plan. And our firm, Gilfix and the Pole, we've helped hundreds of families with Prop 19 planning. We can keep property taxes low, but if you don't plan, mom and dad's hard-earned home, rental property, they might go away because we adult children might not be able to afford the property taxes if they spike up. And we've had many adult children actually pay the legal fees for the protections to lock in the low property taxes because, again, we're the ones who benefit. It's not mom and dad who get hit by Prop 19, it's the kids. Other issues, if you have a child with special needs, if mom and dad haven't haven't coordinated with your plan to make sure that assets go to the special needs trust, or if something happens to me as the adult child and money goes from me and via me down to the next generation, if there's a child with special needs or other issues, we need to make sure that mom and dad's estate plan is coordinated with all that we communicate. Tax planning, asset protection plan. We talk a lot about family protection trusts. We have many adult children who have paid for mom and dad to update their estate plan. So mom and dad create a dynasty trust, a family protection trust for the adult child, because I would rather the money, I don't want to inherit money directly. I want it to go to a trust that protects me from divorce, from lawsuits, and from future estate taxes. Or provides a high level of protection against those things. So if mom and dad create a family protection trust for me, my inheritance has some barriers and some really powerful protections. That's another topic that we think adult children should really bring up is mom and dad, have you thought about more enhanced planning? So really crucial for adult children to talk to their parents about this. What about other family members? What about aunts or uncles or siblings? And when should they be brought in? And Mike, any thoughts there?
This can be obviously more challenging. And at the same time, I think it's easier. It depends on the family circumstances. Where there is an aunt or an uncle or a godparent, if they don't have kids, and you think there's some reason to believe that they may be leaving something to your kids or to you if you are that niece or nephew, harder to have this discussion unless you're really, really close. I don't mean physically, but I mean emotionally really close to these relatives. But again, it's good to know if you can possibly raise it. The parent can have that discussion, I think, with the sibling, the aunt or the uncle of your child. And this comes up all the time when kids are surprised they inherit something, or they're surprised that they don't inherit something. And they're doing some of their life planning depends on an inheritance from Aunt Joan that they're not going to get. So coordinating it. In particular, this is important when you have a special needs child, because you may have created the special needs trust for your child who's on the autism spectrum, some other issue. And here's that Aunt Joan that I mentioned, and she's leaving $100,000 directly to that child. That can mess up eligibility for government benefits and create chaos in the short term. So making sure that they know about the planning that you've done for your kids so that they make everything fit together so that nothing comes into conflict. Grandparents need to coordinate their planning with their kids for their grandkids. We talk about 529 plans, money for education. We love these crummy trusts where you can put money into a trust for a grandkid and let it grow for decades. All these things that can be done that are ideally done from a multi-generational perspective. But again, everybody has to talk.
Let's focus in on the topic of communicating about long-term care. Parents need to talk to their kids about this, but kids also need to talk to their parents about this because there's a huge cost associated with long-term care. Over 70% of Americans over the age of 65 will need some form of long-term care. That just means ongoing support. That can mean care at home. That can mean care in an assisted living facility. It can mean care in a nursing home. But Mike, since we've talked about this a little bit, but why don't you just go over why that's so important, how to maybe frame that? I want to spend just a little time on this subject.
All of us, when we get older, we think about this. We have friends who face crises. Maybe somebody in our family is. So we think about these issues, right? It raises issues of quality of life, quality of care. Where am I going to be? Who's going to provide the care? Are you going to count on your kids for something or not? Asset protection. You may not want $500,000 to go out the window for a certain level of care. Many parents would rather save that money for their kids. Others say, hey, spend everything. I want to stay at home. Age in place. That's what's most important. But again, what are your goals? What are your hopes? What are the dreams? And how are you going to communicate about them? So it directly affects quality of life. And, it really gets to our dignity. We don't want to be in a facility where we are not respected. That's right. I mean, that's a really important point to me. It really is respect. And it goes to quality of life. Quality isn't just physical plant stuff. It's how we feel and how we're treated. So communicating this is on many, many levels. Many issues to address, and the planning that we do only addresses part of it. But again, communication about it is what's so important.
Let's talk about the topics that adult children must bring up with their parents if they want to save hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. And you don't need to be ultra high net worth for this to be important. If you are middle class or upper middle class, these topics are absolutely crucial. And of course, if you're high net worth, it's even more crucial. So what are some of the key topics? If you're an adult child, what do you need to talk to your parents about? If at all possible, we recognize not all families, this is possible. But if you have that decent relationship with your parents, you have to bring this up. And again, when we frame this, it should not be about, hey, mom and dad, I want you, how can we save everything for me? It should much be more, it has to be framed around legacy. I think it's about saving what mom and dad have worked so hard for the adult child generation, but also for future generations, for kids, for grandkids, for great-grandkids. We live in a very uncertain world. I think everybody's worried that artificial intelligence is going to take their job, or there's instability in the government, or the world's going to be a very chaotic place, and it is. And who knows what the economic future is going to be. So preserving family assets and minimizing those tax hits is crucial, because taxes, that's money out the window. You get nothing back for it. When you're paying higher taxes, in theory, maybe it serves better government services, but we all see that in California. More taxes does not mean better government services. So the current state tax exemption is $12.92 million per person. For a couple, that's over $25 million right now that you can pass tax free. So if you're ultra high net worth, you know your parents are, you got to talk about that because we can save millions of dollars with estate tax planning. But even if you're not at that level, estate tax laws change over time. And the exemption's set to drop on January 1st, 2026. It'll be cut in half. So it'll probably be around 6.5, 7 million per person. You don't know what mom and dad necessarily have. If you just own a house in the Bay Area or Los Angeles or San Diego, the house alone could get you close to the limit for a single person. If the limit, the estate tax exemption is around 6 million, 7 million a person, a house in some areas, especially with inflation and home values rising, that alone could be estate tax issues. And do mom and dad really want a big chunk of what they work so hard for to go to the IRS, or would they rather it stay in the family? Family protection trust is a no-brainer for most families. It's a form of a dynasty trust. It's just we've created where mom and dad don't leave a penny to a child. They leave it to a family protection trust for that child. If you haven't talked to your parents about this, we have many adult clients who will actually pay for mom and dad to create family protection trust for them. Why? Well, there's 3 big benefits. If you've seen our other talks, you know what these are. But by leaving assets to a family protection trust rather than to a child directly, there's a big protection in case you, the adult child, ever gets divorced. The assets you inherit are in a totally separate subject. They shouldn't be lost in a divorce settlement. 2, if you're ever sued, there's a barrier. It makes it much harder for someone going after your money to get the money in that trust. If you inherit directly, there's no protections. And 3, estate taxes. All or most of the assets in a family protection trust, plus the growth during your life in the value of those assets, it's not part of your taxable estate. So that's for your kids or, hey, the grandkids. What about the idea when we're talking about these tax and asset protection issues, framing it around the grandkids rather than around, if you're the adult child, maybe that's a really good strategy, right? To make this less seemingly selfish.
Well, I think that's right. Yeah, the ultimate beneficiaries of dynasty trusts really are the grandkids, because it dramatically increases the likelihood that assets you leave your kids are going to be safe, protected, and grow without exposure to that 40% estate tax. I mean, it's punishing. So, yeah, multi-generational isn't just parent and child. We want to look to as many generations as we can.
Yeah, and if you've seen our talks, you know Prop 19. Okay, we're probably California's Prop 19 attorneys at this point. I hope we are. But you need to be aware of this. Prop 19 is a new law passed in 2021, and it's not the subject of this talk. But it doesn't affect parents. It affects the next generation. And if you don't do planning, the family home might be lost. The rental might be lost, because Prop 19 without planning means that property taxes for anything you've owned for a long time could spike up by 100%, 200%. We've seen some families where they could go up by 1,000% or more, like 30, 40, 50, $60,000 per year in property tax increases. We can prevent that if we work together. If you're the adult child, you're the one who's going to save the money, not mom and dad. So, hey, maybe you bring mom and dad in, but you should at least talk to them about it. Hey, mom and dad, how important is it to you that we preserve these properties you work so hard for? So it's about saving that family home for the kids, the grandkids. And again, that's a wonderful way to frame it. Mom and dad, it's not about saving property taxes. How can we keep the family home? These topics really affect us more than mom and dad in many cases. So it's on us sometimes to bring these up. But again, it should not just be about us. It shouldn't be about how much am I going to get. It's about preserving mom and dad's goals and dreams and preserving their legacy for future generations. And maybe make it about the grandkid, because grandkids, everybody loves grandkids, sometimes more than the kids. Let's go to some action items. So communicating about estate planning. What are some action items you can take right now? Well, we offered some different ways you can think about it. But again, if it's parents talking to their kids or kids talking to their parents, this needs to be framed not around dry estate planning topics or legal, my trust and my power of attorney. It's about your fears. It's about your goals. It's about your dreams. It's about empowering people that you love. So think about it. Frame it ahead of time in positive terms. 2, set a time to discuss this. If you're the adult child, set a time to talk to your parents. Parents, set a time to talk to your children. Now, we talked about different events when this is a good time. The birth of a grandchild, health scare, someone comes into some money, or family holidays where you come together, Thanksgiving, whenever people are together. It's much better done in person, but we live in a time where Zoom meetings aren't so bad either. And again, make a list of topics for those. I think it can be a free-flowing conversation, but when you think about that, maybe make a list of things you want to talk about and what those specific, like who's named as trustee, what type of plan do we have in place, what tax issues do we need to be aware of. Just take action, have the talk. Meet with the attorney then. Meet with us. We can help you with that. Actually, when it comes to a time to set these talks with your families, having a meeting with us or another attorney, if God forbid you don't work with us, it can be a wonderful excuse to have these conversations with your family. Make us the bad guy or the good guy. Say, hey, I talked to my team at Gilfix in the poll, and they said I need to talk about this with you. That's a good use of our services. Make us the bad guy, or make us the excuse to talk about this and take action. Don't sweep this under the rug. And should you meet with us, by the way, if you're an existing client or if you haven't met with us, I think it's some key issues to think about. It all feeds into communicating. Do you have an up-to-date estate plan? Has it been more than 3 or 5 years since you reviewed it? Do you know what kind of trust structure you have? An A/B trust or not trust? Do you even know what kind of trust you have? Have you revisited your backup trustees who you've named in the documents? Have you talked to your kids about this? Are they named as trustee? Are they not? Do you have a rental property or a home in California and you want to preserve it for future generations? Is your estate approaching $5 million or $10 million? You need to be worried about estate taxes. And most importantly, do you hope to protect your legacy and your assets for future generations? And do you want to make sure that your dreams and goals are carried out? So you can talk to us. So I think there's two paths. One, you have the conversation with your family before meeting with us, and then you meet with us, having this sort of list of goals and dreams, of shared goals and shared dreams, or you meet with us and use that as the excuse to talk about this with your kids and grandkids. So think about your goals, review your assets, talk to your family, make sure you have that. We're big believers in integrated legal and financial teams. Just like families should communicate, you should have a lawyer who communicates with your financial advisors. You can think about how all these link together. We're actually building that right now, just because, again, we think communication is so important in every situation because there's no one size fits all approach. We want to build a combination of tools to make sure your dreams are carried out. So we want to help you build that team. We want you to communicate within your family, and we want to be part of that team that communicates as well. And we also think, again, financial plan should be integrated with your legal plan. We're building an integrated legal financial services team, by the way, for anybody interested in learning more about that, contact us. We want you to have that. We want open communication across all lines. That's where problems are solved. So we don't want you to be this guy. Don't keep your head in the sand. Talk to your family about this if you can. This is about preserving your legacy, about making sure your dreams and your hopes come true. And if you want to meet with us, very easy to do it. Gilfix.com, 650-493-8070. Please spread the word, subscribe to our channel, comment. If you're watching this on YouTube, comment. Let us give us a question there as well. As my mom likes to say, hope everybody stays safe, sane, and healthy. Mike, any final thoughts?
Let's be sane and talk and embrace the good things that are going on in our lives.
Absolutely. Well, take care, everybody. We will see you next time.